Hey folks, welcome back. So today we are going to be talking about the recent Apple event that just happened. You're going to hear basically our takes, what we thought of the event, and how we kind of feel about it. Unfortunately, Chris is not here to join us, so it's just me and Jacob today. Jacob, any thoughts? I'm going to bring up the page as we speak right now.
Yeah, just that, with every fall Apple event, we got mostly hardware, focus on the new iPhones, the new watches, and the new, usually they talk about AirPods at this event. This year was no exception. The thing that was different about this year, as expected, was a bunch of sort of Apple Intelligence cut in throughout the hardware announcements. And this page that Dylan pulled up is a great example of that. You can already see all the rainbow gradients all over the page. So I think first we'll just kind of walk through what was announced and talk through the different hardware categories, and then we'll just, discuss our thoughts and talk a little bit more about the AI announcements in particular, because obviously that's what we care about the most.
Yeah, sounds great. So, iPhone 16 Pro. I mean, again, both iPhone 16 and iPhone 16 Pro, marginal updates versus iPhone 15. I feel like the only thing was really that like camera control. Obviously, the Pro had a few more, like chip and battery upgrades. It really looks like they were leaning on Apple Intelligence pretty hard as the big upsell here, right?
Yeah, it looks like on the software side, most of the resources went towards Apple Intelligence, and on the hardware side, the only difference is this special sort of, it's a crossover between the action button and the stock on an AirPods and maybe the trackpad on Macs. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But in terms of hardware, sort of camera bumps, a slightly larger battery, and that new fancy button, not a button, is what we have in store on the next iPhone. And in terms of the iPhone 16, it's even less, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of as expected, totally a spec bump from last year.
And it went back to the stacked camera. It's kind of weird that it feels like we're somehow capping out on innovation. I know, we'll talk about the camera button, but kind of went back to the design language of like iPhone 13 or 12, whatever the old kind of camera stack was. And the colors were an interesting choice as well, from what I remember. So, yeah. Interesting, as someone who, I love Apple products, have one myself, and run like an Apple setup. It's one of the years where it didn't really feel like there was much of an upgrade relative to the previous generation. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, and I think, like Dylan was getting at, we are sort of reaching the perfect iPhone design. Like, it's not changing much every year. And I don't think that's some people complain about that, but I don't want it to change very much. I like my iPhone. And I think they've really zeroing in on what the perfect design for a smartphone is. And then, so yeah, we look towards the software, and the revolution right now is AI, and of course we're biased, but we spend a lot of time thinking about it. And I think we're very excited to see what Apple's going to do in this space, and we'll talk about it more, but maybe we haven't seen them yet do the sort of world-changing things that we want them to do. So I think, my overall take on the 16 and 16 Pro is we're going to have to wait to see how much Apple Intelligence affects things, right? Because, these will be some of the few phones, I think it's 15 Pro and up, that will support Apple Intelligence. So, these are two of the three phones that will support it. And, they've invested in the big thing for the Pro is the significantly larger battery. Obviously, as with every year, they put a lot of emphasis on how efficient the A18 series of chips are. And so, clearly a lot of investment went into these, both short-term and long-term AI investments, right? Battery life is huge if you're doing a lot of constant computationally intensive processes in the background. So, I just think we'll have to see, these aren't sexy updates, but if Apple Intelligence really does get good, then these are the kind of updates that will make a difference in your experience down the road. So it's a wait and see for me.
100% agree. Plus one. Next hardware category, Apple Watch Series 10, Apple Watch Ultra 2. Again, not massively changed, not very sexy updates, honestly. I know, I'm very excited for when they do some of their next big sensor upgrades. I know, they're talking about sleep apnea and stuff like that, but I've heard rumors about blood glucose monitoring and stuff like that. I think that would be killer, right? Those are the sort of things that would be a massive, whoa, I want to upgrade immediately. But for now, a lot of it was really just, again, small incremental upgrades, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am interested. I didn't catch it, but did they announce, massively changed battery life? Because one of my current complaints with Apple Watches is using it for sleep often means that you have to like charge at weird times,
I
right?
don't remember them talking about increased battery life. In fact, I remember them spending a
Yeah.
lot more time on how it's the thinnest Apple Watch ever, and they also spent a bunch of time talking about fast charging, which it's the
Mm,
fastest charging Apple Watch ever, which sounds to me
that's right.
like they put an efficient chip in it and maybe did some creative things to keep its power consumption low and maybe even
Mm,
shrunk the battery. Like, I don't think this is our
okay.
fastest charging Apple Watch ever necessarily means we put a super fast charging battery in, like super high
Yeah.
tech battery. It sounds more like, along with making the watch thinner, they actually shrunk the battery, but they were able to keep a similar battery life. So I would actually expect battery life to potentially go down a little bit. But again, it's a wait and see.
Next up, AirPods. They were actually kind of a cool category. Like, well, biased because more focused on the software side of things. But with the AirPods Pro having the health checks and clinical kind of like hearing aid, very interesting. AirPod 4. I mean, I love AirPods. I'm literally using them right now. Again, though, a lot of these very incremental changes. Surprised the AirPod Maxes, from what I remember, didn't really have again a massive upgrade, right? Again, very
No, no,
incremental
it was just
changes.
colors. It was colors. And they
It's colors of
finally added
USB-C,
USB-C.
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they
But
basically brought the AirPods
that's
Max up to spec. But,
yeah,
do a search for the AirPod Max if you're thinking about buying them and see what people say on Reddit. Like the
yeah.
potential class action lawsuits forming. Like, I wouldn't spend this much money on headphones that, for some people, clearly don't last.
Wow.
And so the fact that they haven't, like, changed the design at all, and, like, I have bricked AirPods Maxes in my house that Apple refused to repair or replace. It was going to be like $300 something, more than half the price of the AirPods of the original product to repair them. And it
Mm,
was not. I
mm.
didn't damage them. They just stopped working one day.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so the fact that they still haven't updated that product, it's like, I don't even know what to think about that. And then honestly, I'm a little
Uh,
confused on the earbud side of the lineup too, because
mm,
they took most of the features from the AirPod Pro and brought them to the AirPods 4,
mm.
or specifically the AirPods 4 with active noise cancellation. And then the AirPods Pro themselves, as Dylan was saying, got a bunch of, in my opinion, pretty niche, like, hearing protection and hearing augmentation features
Mm.
that, like, the hearing aid might be really useful if you need a hearing aid. That's not me, and that's not a lot of Apple's fandom.
Mm.
And
Mm.
the sort of hearing protection stuff is great. I'm sure doctors love it, but that doesn't get people excited, to be honest. Or, like, at least, I mean, I don't hear people talking about it on the street. I mean, Dylan, you seemed
Yeah,
excited, but I think it's cool. And, like, I also do think that, like, some of it's some percent marketing on the hearing protection
yeah,
side. Like, it
yep,
they are basically earplugs. Like, if you turn them off and they were dead on battery, like, they would help your hearing. They would probably have most of the same benefits because they're earplugs.
yep. And look, to your point, actually, now that I think about it, like it is just a software update. So part of me is like, it again feels a little bit weak that the only thing they can offer, like I guess this isn't a refresh, but why couldn't that be in say AirPods 4? Now, and part of that is probably the actual design of it being literally, AirPlug, and they'll probably claim like, oh, chip or hardware, but if that's the only thing separating, the fours from the Pro, suddenly the Pro lineup is seeming weaker, right? Which is a very kind of strange Apple move. And maybe
Yeah.
we'll talk more about this, but I often say now, like, to be fair, I think Steve Jobs would be rolling in his grave with some of the decisions that are being made by Apple at the moment. Because, you rightfully said AirPods 4 now basically are just Pros without the earbuds, right? Like relative to like
Yeah, without the little
literally
rubber
before this
tips,
was
right?
announced. Yeah,
Yep.
they just don't. And for me, I don't even like the rubber tips. So I'm like, wow, great. I just got a massive upgrade. I don't even have to upgrade to the Pros, right? So now I'm going to save every time I want to like upgrade. Um, so it's interesting what they've done. I mean, I would summarize this event as being extremely small incremental hardware updates and Apple Intelligence, which we'll talk about, which is still very much a catch-up game. But let's dive into Apple
Hmm.
Intelligence. Do you have anything to talk about before the hardware side?
Yeah, maybe let's jump into the iPhone Pro
Yeah.
page and kind of see what they call out, because I think, like, it's telling. What Apple puts on these pages will be telling, and so we've got our beautiful animation as they always do.
Oh, my scroll is for some reason very laggy. Take total camera control.
It's interesting though that they haven't.
Usually it's very smooth when I do the scroll. I'm manually scrolling right now just to make sure that it's not. Yeah, this is the brains behind Apple Intelligence.
So they're promoting the new chip. But again, we haven't seen anything about the features, the Apple Intelligence features here yet.
Let me go back up. Maybe it was up.
Yeah.
No,
maybe just go to the Apple Intelligence page. Because they have a page.
Here we go. This is just Apple Intelligence AI opening possibilities in beta coming this fall. So interesting that they haven't actually fully released it, even before, iPhone 16 comes over. And what they're kind of showing here as their top of the line features: boost your productivity, express yourself visually, and a new era for Siri. Those are really the three parts of Apple Intelligence.
So should we walk through them?
Yeah. Let's go boost your productivity. So writing tools, summaries of transcripts, and priority messages in mail.
So I think it's interesting, for writing tools, this thing is table stakes. I mean, and even the UX they used for it, we can do once we get beta, we'll do a whole video trying out Apple Intelligence and reviewing it. But the experience I've seen showed off for the writing tools is a very similar experience you can get in every word processor. And I say that, I don't know if there's a counterexample. Every mainstream word processor, even from the small ones like the Notions, the startup-y ones, to the big ones like Google Docs and Word, all have these features. So this is catch-up. Then on the sort of voice memo summary, it's okay, that's okay. That's nice. I mean, they've been doing summaries or they've been doing transcription of scam calls for a while now. So, or voicemails as well. Mm-hmm. So, it seems like this feature doesn't seem, super LLM to me. I mean, I know they're using an LLM for the summary, but, I just, personally, I would rather actually have built-in transcripts to the Notes app that, and I actually haven't been in the Notes app in a long time, so maybe they already have this, but maybe this is just the Pro Chat GPT self, but, I think I'd rather have the transcript so that I can go do whatever I want.
This entire thing, all the productivity stuff, I think, like you've been saying, very much table stakes, almost weak at this point coming from Apple, right? The fact that it feels like Apple, being this innovator, is catching up. A lot of these things are really just not that useful, right? When they say boost your productivity. First of all, are people do use their phones as their main drivers, but it just doesn't feel super useful, right? It's not groundbreaking. It's not agentic and actually moving the needle. These are all very much we just put this into an SLM and gave you an example.
And they're all this features is saving that were available elsewhere, right?
Yep. Yeah. You can download an app and
and including this priority messages in mail. Gmail's been doing this for years, and just because you put a gradient on it doesn't make it any different than Gmail's priority inbox. That's what they've added here. So great.
And they're really just using the bare minimum you can use for LLMs, right? Again, there is no innovation here. This is just trying to put in whatever they can at the easiest possible use case, as opposed to saying, hey, we're going to try something radically new and this is how AI should work, or leaning into things like shortcuts and stuff. They've instead tried to be hey, let's just add these in because we already know they're vetted. We already know everyone does this, and we need an AI table stakes. But I think this shows how Apple is looking towards AI, but in a way it's a little bit worrying that this is all that they're really putting out in terms of productivity, right? That's not to say that
if we can talk for a minute about why, you had brought up a good point of they're doing the bare minimum with an SLM that they can, right? And so it's one theory is that they want to keep as much of it on device as possible, so they're using small, very limited models limited in
True.
both reasoning capability and maybe even how much they can call them because of like device power constraints, like power consumption or something like that.
True.
And that's why they're limited in their features. You know, another example is that actually, they have their Apple private cloud or whatever, and they can use larger models and they can call off to OpenAI whenever they want, but they're just struggling to keep up, or they want for some reason to do a slow rollout and start with small features. The annoying thing is that there's no way for us to tell, because as far as I've seen, there is no way to know your data is staying on your phone versus when your data is leaving your phone. And this is like a landmark moment for Apple. And because they've always been so in your face about how important privacy is, how important keeping your data on device is. So of course they had to jump through all these hoops when they announced that Apple Intelligence was not going to be solely on device and they were going to have a cloud component. And then because everything's Apple and everything's simple and everything's safe and everything's secure, they just don't tell you. So far as I've seen, you have no way of knowing when your data is going to the Apple private cloud versus when it's staying on your phone. And that's a little ridiculous coming from a company that's supposed to be the champion for your data privacy and your data sovereignty.
I assume that most of it is going to be on device. I reckon they just add that bit about going into the private cloud as something they'll do later, because this is all giving me SLM vibes, right? Like you don't need to go, to write like what are they giving, a 6-line letter to do something that's a summary that's literally just taking and condensing something. And I even know like they do the like whole like notifications, you might have like 10 notifications, they condense it into one summary sort of thing, like a 80 character message. That feels like it's not going to the cloud. And maybe they're just like, damn, we don't know how to like solve this design problem. As you say, that is probably exactly what they're thinking. And they're like, ugh, how do we know? How do you like audit it? These are probably very hard things. From the other stance though, even though that's the hoops they need to jump through, as you kind of identified, from a consumer standpoint, I don't think that is justifying having these weak features, right? Like I'm a consumer, we kind of know a little bit more about the like details of how these things work. So we're like, oh, okay, we understand why you did this. If I'm a consumer with no AI knowledge, I'm just going to be like, you just gave me like basically Grammarly and you summarized this thing, but like ChatGPT already did that for me or whatever. Like if you use AI stuff. This could be the first time people actually interact with AI productivity tools, but again, I think most people who have already used these tools, who are like, somewhat a power user, they're going to be very much like, huh? Like, is that it? Especially given that they would have already invested into like the existing apps that already exist that frankly do a better job of this. Now, maybe this is a good time to move over to the next one where Apple seems to be doing something slightly different. I say different, now I look at it, I'm like, damn, this is really what they're going for. Like making, new emojis and stuff like that. But I remember them showing during the, like a couple of months ago, they did like an Apple Intelligence thing where they were at least innovating with how you have this like design paradigm of like, you put the message in, it like slightly changes it, or like there were like, different emojis and they combine and stuff like that, or you could like drag and drop or something like that. But they were at least trying to change up the UX a little bit. I guess they talk about an image playground app and cleanup. Now, the first two, the Gemmoji and image playground app, this just feels like it's DALL-E or like Designer. Like it's just, again, image AI catch up, and cleanup literally has been in like the whole like Android ecosystem for ages.
Forever.
Right? Like, that is
Forever.
like, I can't believe like like Pixel and Samsung have had ads with this, and now Apple's doing it. Like to me, it's crazy. Again,
and
I say
it's
like
hamstrung. I think they're using like diffusion model generative fill here, but it's like so. Assuming Dylan's right and it's on device, they're doing like basically generative fill, the Photoshop feature, but with a fixed prompt, and the prompt is remove this person, and right, or remove, clean up this area of the image, right? And so in Photoshop, users who are waiting for Apple Intelligence, you can go to Photoshop today and try generative fill, and it's not limited to removing people. You can add anything you want or remove anything you want. So again, I guess Dylan's saying it's an example of like, from a bunch of different angles, whether you're looking at was this in Samsung phones a while ago, was this in Google's OS a while ago, is this something you can do with other current generative AI products today? The answer is like yes for all of them, and it's really embarrassing. And then on the other features, the ones that expecting them to, as they did with the cleanup, make it very limited. Whereas it seems like, with the image playground, they have built a whole UX for generating images. That's another thing that will be interesting, like an actual good UX. Like Midjourney's been the best image generator for over a year, and their UX has been Discord for most of that time. Like image generation needs far better UX. So I'm happy to see Apple taking on that, and I'm excited to try it. But then a lot of the ways that they like tried to make it more interesting and tried to make it a usable feature are either weird. They're just weird. And one of them is this like Genmoji thing, which at least fits into their previous throwaway feature, make it a big emoji thing. Not a surprise, not going to change the world. But then the other feature, I'm not sure if you scroll down, I'm not sure if it's here.
I don't believe so.
There's a feature where you can take photos of somebody in your library and make like a cartoon of them, basically like insert them into the generated photo, which to me is like the biggest red teaming responsible AI red flag I've ever seen in a production product. Apple's doing it and about to launch it to everyone. Like I'm very surprised.
That'll be so interesting to test. The other thing that just screams to me is it doesn't fit with like the Apple like design language. Like particularly that example where you generate a cartoon. When has Apple ever been associated with like cartoons and stuff like that? That was always like an Android kind of hacky ecosystem. Even look at like
disagree. Pixar.
Tell me.
It's Pixar. Pixar's been the association with Apple. So there's so much shared DNA there. Steve ran Pixar for a long time. Steve bought and ran Pixar for a long time. And that relationship blossomed into this relationship between Apple and Disney as a whole once Disney bought Pixar from Steve. So there is that connection there, and they've been doing the Memoji. So it does. I think it kind of fits, but it fits into a non-valuable bucket. Like I don't know.
I agree. The Memoji stuff looks good, like in terms of their design language. What I was referring to was the Image Playground app. That's like Midjourney. That's like hacky AI, and I could be wrong. Like this is from what I remember. It just looked nothing like an Apple thing. To me, the Image Playground.
We'll see.
I think the Gemmoji screams Apple.
The examples they showed,
even down to, as you say, the fact that they're doing UX
of the bring your friend into
and all
AI
that good stuff. Really, really good.
The examples they showed of like bring your friend into AI, they looked more Apple-y. Like they looked sort of like a Memoji, basically.
Yeah. Okay, awesome.
But I think I noticed in the same way you noticed that some of the just prompted generations in the Image Playground app or Designer or whatever we're calling it, they were a little bit more random, right? So that's when it starts to get into the, how much are they going to push the art style into something that looks good in an Apple UI or next to Apple illustrations versus how much control are they going to give the user? It'll be interesting to see.
Will be very exciting to play around with. The RIA stuff, very interesting. It'll be awesome to compare how it goes, or how it compares to, say, Grok and other like big tech companies. So it'll be very exciting to play around with it. Then the last thing they announced, obviously, was a new era for Siri. Now, again, from what I've seen, they love demoing this screen. It's basically a UX change, right? Like having the bubbles come down, having the gradient around the phone. I mean, in a way, it makes sense. Makes it feel like there's like, I think they're getting towards this design language of like having AI as this embodied agent, right? Like, this thing has now come into the forefront and is here to listen to you. They're talking about awareness of personal context. So I'm sure they're starting to deal with a lot of this, like, longer term of like, hey, how do we deal with agents and when they come through and stuff like that. So I think the first step is now making these like cool UX and like the Apple design language. They talk about richer language understanding. They talk about, even if you stumble over your words, and they love doing the like, and you like rephrase or something like, okay.
They literally showed this in a demo. Like,
yeah,
the LLM revolution is happening. Apple, what are you using them for? You can stumble over your words. And in a demo, they were like, Siri, can you write him? Sorry, I mean, can you, right? And I was like, wow, okay, that's what it couldn't handle before, was like you just like restarting midway through the sentence. And I mean, good for you guys.
I know. Like, and again, just to kind of frame up, and the step-by-step instructions. Yeah, this is the only other thing they're showing. I think before I put my like judgment, I do want to see how aware it is of personal context and how much more useful Siri gets. But based on what they presented, again, as you're saying, the LLM revolution, the AI revolution is happening, and this is what they want to offer, right? Like a slightly better Siri is what it seems like. This is not Siri is going to help fully customize your day. Siri is going to help like revolutionize how you like, connect with community, or something like that. Like it's not taking anything or providing you anything massively novel. It's just an incremental improvement, despite having this massive leap in technology. And again, it just very much feels like it's, table stakes and or a very small upgrade to whatever existing apps and AI like features already exist in most of these apps.
Like Dylan said, it's like writing or the image gen, both of which are table stakes. And the truly most interesting feature is the image gen, the deep fake generator basically that they've made. And so like, but that's interesting because it's an RAI concern, not because I want to put my friends in a meme, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I mean, they are doing well. Like if I scroll down, they have privacy implications and private cloud compute and stuff like that. So these are all very interesting. Like, they say, for example, need your passport number while booking a flight. Siri can help you without compromising your privacy. And maybe part of this is, a longer term vision of helping people be a little bit more okay with robots touching private data, right? Especially as they get a bit more humanoid and stuff. It's kind of weird, actually, when you think about it, to have this like human voice speak your passport or SSN. Like you're going to be like, huh? Right? Like it's not as robotic anymore. So, this might be part of a longer term vision, but again, it's, they talk about all new superpowers. There's no way these are like superpowers,
There are no superpowers,
right? These are table stakes. And again, maybe I'm expecting the average consumer to have, looked at some of these things or be aware of it. That could very well not be the case, right? When you think about it, power users probably make up a very small subset. So maybe people see this like, wow, I can't believe Siri can do this. I can stumble over my words, or, oh, I needed to learn how I could add background blur to portrait, and I'm just happening to use Siri all the time, and I think about to do this as opposed to throwing down my phone in frustration or getting a younger person to do it. Like, again, I just don't really know the overlap of who is really using these features that is not a power user that is going to be impressed by these new features relative to people who won't ever use Siri, won't ever use these features, or maybe just sees the UX and it's like, oh, okay. So all up, kind of underwhelmed by Apple Intelligence, and I guess we'll have to see, like, we might test it. There might be other things they haven't demoed yet, and there might be like a great upgrade next year. They might be putting in the foundation. Like it is a multi-year kind of battle, but it really feels like Apple is playing a catch-up game. And to be fair, that is what they've been doing the past couple of years, right? They just wait until something's perfected, integrate it. I don't know your thoughts, but honestly, that's kind of how it feels to me.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I think there's, some interesting things, some things I might use. Basically, the writing assistants and the image gen, maybe I'll use. We'll see. There's some truly underwhelming things, like the step-by-step instructions. Like the fact that it anything simple enough for it to give it instructions for that are easy to follow, it should be able to do those things. So
yeah, actually true.
So basically, I think it's a lot of table stakes, a lot of catch up, not blown away. But then at the end of the day, most people's, I would imagine, first time interacting with a large language model will be via Apple Intelligence, and so then that's also probably true for the specific features. Like that's also true for their diffusion model. Like the vast majority of people have never generated an image with AI or never even interacted with AI. And because it's all still pretty new and, it's kind of scary and it's not showing up. It's only now showing up everywhere where people are used to using technology, whether that's in Facebook search or in Google search or in Apple, like your iPhone or your Mac OS.
Yep.
And so, they will contribute to this slow normalization of like generative AI.
I'm excited at least to like try the beta. Excited to see, as you say,
it.
like how normal users, like just like the average user actually appreciates it. They might be like, wow, this is so good, and that would be amazing. So yeah, be exciting to see this fall. But overall, I do think it was an interesting take that this was the major kind of thing selling iPhone 16s.
Yep.
And from the AI perspective, we're like, is that it? Like it's kind of interesting world, but at least kind of presents the idea that AI is super important because that's what Apple is kind of leading with, and they're one of the biggest businesses in the world.
Yeah, so I think like we'll definitely do another one of these when Apple Intelligence is out, or at least when it's in beta, so we can actually try it, put it to the test, see how it behaves in real situations. But until then, let us know if you want us to do more of these types of news reaction videos. Also check out, we recently uploaded a video of Dylan and I and Chris trying out Replit, a new agents feature, software development agents. So check that out. And as always, kind of let us know your feedback. Let us know what kind of content you want us to make. And we'll see you in the next video.
Yeah. Like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks. Bye-bye.